Hello everyone, I am back again. I want to say huge thanks to my former patrons, you guys literally saved my life. It's been a few hard years for me since the last video, but I still decided to resume the work on this channel. But it may be not as tensely as before. You will still have suffer from my outrageous accent! But jokes aside, I came across one of the legends sung in the Portuguese poem of 16th century, famously related by the poet of Luís de Camões in his 1572 Os Lusíadas, 12 of England, which initially left me both delighted and bewildered at the same time. I have little doubt that the story is purely a figment of an imagination of the authors of those years. Digging a little deeper, we can find quite a lot of curious detail that you might find curious. So what's interesting about it? First of all, it's undoubtedly romantic chivalric courtesan spirit. It's probably the kind of thing that made me fall in love with stories about knight. And secondly, it's utterly confusing plot. So let's get to the point. According to legend, in the 1380s, 12 scumbag English knights insulted 12 ladies-in-waiting of household of Duchess of Lancaster, that is the wife of John Gaunt, Earl of Lancaster. So what was the nature of insult? Researchers only in 17th century managed to find the answer of the rather important question. They formulated it as follows. English knights called ladies very ugly, too ugly to be loved and too ugly to serve the ducal household, and challenged any man who would try to prove them wrong. The insult supposedly arose only after the ladies refused these knights' proposals. In those days the ladies could not challenge the offenders themselves, so they appealed to their master, John of Gaunt. But he was unable to find any English champions to defend the honor of the ladies. This is a very curious point, which was a starting point for the idea of this video. There were not enough knights in England at that time? Well, even me can name several. But there definitely were much more, and we'll deal with that a little later. Let me first go on with the story. These 12 offended knights, renowned to their martial prowess, so were too widely feared. Recalling his Iberian campaigns in the 1370s and 1380s, and his bravery of the Portuguese knights he encountered there, Lancaster recommended that they search for a champion among them. In one version of the legend, John Gaunt wrote down the names of the 12 Portuguese knights from his memory, had the ladies draw lots of a match to the knight, and then had each of the ladies write a letter of appeal to their champion. John of Gaunt wrote a separate letter himself to his son-in-law, John I of Portugal, asking him to grant the Portuguese knight permission to travel to England for this noble endeavor. The Portuguese king read the letter to Portuguese knightly public, and a large number of people volunteered to show their superiority, moral and physical, over the cowardly English knights, and the ladies to protect the offended, of course. The names of those wishing to do so were written on papers, and the ladies, like a lottery, picked the blind leaf of these 12 pieces. According to another version, these names were sent to England along with their knights' mottos. The offended ladies chose by the mottos they liked the most, and only then did they learn the names of their defenders. The point is that the ladies were defended individually, not as a group. So that was the turning point of the story. So why it is so tense, for example. So it was not in a group. Each of the ladies were represented by her own champion. So how did John Gaunt would know the Portuguese knight? If you remember, we talked about this when this escaped the Spanish campaign in the 100 Years' War, where he and his brother, the Black Prince, helped restore Pedro I the Cruel to the throne by fighting French mercenaries under the command of Bertrand de Guesclin. So it is likely that Portuguese knight also helped fight for the throne of Castile. You should also remember that John Gaunt had 3 wives. The first wife, Blanche of Lancaster, who had 7 children and died at blooming age, possibly of a plague. The Earl was buried next to her, so it's believed that their marriage was a happy one. His second one was Constance of Castile, who was the daughter of King of Castile and Leon and his mistress. The most favorite mistress of all wives and mistresses, by whom the king had 3 daughters. There is an interesting piece of the story. When this mistress suddenly died of a plague, the king informed everyone that they had secretly married for a long time, thus making his own subsequent marriages illegal. The third wife, Catherine Swynford, Duchess of Lancaster, was a noble birth and was a maid of honor at the court of John Gaunt's first and second wives. At the same time, she became John's own mistress and bore him some 4 children. He broke off relations with her under the public pressure, but after the death of his second wife, married her anyway. He also legitimized his children with Catherine. That was a true love, I guess. But in fact, that marriage caused quite a scandal. So, with his first wife, Blanche of Lancaster, he had a daughter, Philippa, who wasn't very pretty indeed, but she was very clever. She was not married until she was 27 years old, to the very same King John I of Portugal. As I mentioned earlier, Philippa was born out of wedlock, and prior to her formal acceptance, I believe she suffered a lot of humiliation because of it. However, John I was himself the illegitimate son of his father by a woman of unknown birth, and knew how frustrating it was not to be taken seriously because of your background. John loved Philippa for her intelligence. They had as many as 9 children, and he even sent his mistress away. That's the love. If you're still with me, that rather complicated family situation explains why and where exactly the Portuguese Knights came from. We should also keep in mind that John of Gaunt's second wife, Constance of Canstal, was a foreigner. Accordingly, and her maids of honor, who were more counselors and friends of noble ladies than servants, were also foreigners. That is why the English knights were not particularly eager to intercede for their honor. In this way, the story does not look so incredible anymore, does it? But it wouldn't make it less romantic. Further, in the best traditions of Hollywood action movie, I mean romantic chivalric novels, the following happens. 11 Portuguese knights arrived in England by sea and began to prepare for a tournament with English scumbags to prove to them that the ladies are quite good and look much better than these offending knights found them. But 12th knight, however, named Alvaro Gonzalez Cantillo, nicknamed Magriso, decided to stand out, most likely to draw special attention to himself, and became the main highlight of the upcoming event. So he traveled separately overland and in no hurry, only stopping, I believe, for eating, drinking, sleeping, sightseeing, a little stroll on his way to London across the continent. The tournament was scheduled at Smithfield, London, one of the most famous places in the Middle Ages, where tournaments, fairs, public executions were usually held, and where William Walworth, Lord Mayor of London, would later kill Wat Tyler. And so, all other knights are in place and Magriso is absent. The day of the tournament draws near. Naturally, the maid he is supposed to protect is all nervous. The audience was thinking only of him. Will he or won't he show up? Will he'll be late or in time? 11 punctual young men are no longer of any interest to anyone. Everyone was waiting for this unpunctual one. They were mad, angrily cursing, but they were only thinking about him. That Magriso was a real PR man. So now the tournament begins. Everyone settled on their seats. The maid of Magriso was supposed to defend is hysterical. The opposing sides are already taken to their position on the field, and then gates open, and at the last moment, gathering all the cream of the public's attention to the applause, Magriso enters the field. He sends air kisses to everyone, to the maiden, and once again he's got everyone's on the back foot. He was definitely skillful in attracting attention. Well, what's happened next was a very hard and bloody fight. Some English knights were killed, and in the end the Portuguese won. A relative of the fallen English knights swore to avenge the fallen, so the Portuguese knights have to return home. Except Magriso, who had not enough adventures, and he decided to linger on the northern Europe, and eventually entered the service of a Count of Flanders for some time. I have little doubt that this is a fictional story, but these details they show that it really can be like this, because of these minor historical pieces that very well fits together. Portuguese are so fond of that story that they built a fountain in the depiction of a knight in the gardens of Marquis de Fronteira. Well, technically that's it. So how do you like the story? I also beg your pardon for a video edit. I had to give up Adobe and I'm still getting used to the new program. So, thank you all. It won't take that much time for the next video to publish. And if you want something light and very silly, you can subscribe to my another new channel where I put my animation. It's called Zero Skill Animation, and you can find it here. So thank you one more time, and bye bye.